Hello everyone, Dark of All Trades here. Now today, I want to get into the science of things. I tend to lecture about a lot of philosophical ideas, and taking claims and breaking them down to easy to understand chunks that I can explain to all of you, my wonderful and no doubt of above average intelligence and attractiveness audience. So today, we're going to look at some science claims by Christians and see if they hold up. Let's get ready to talk about science. And as a disclaimer, I'm going to use science in a more colloquial sense here, so I hope that takes care of any nitpicks from the onset. I figured I should start easy. For this one, I'm going back to an old favorite of Answers in Genesis. This one is titled, What Science Can't Explain, the Bible Can. But before I do, I'll ask a question and we'll see how many of you know AIG. Now, this talk isn't done by Ken Ham, so that may make it more challenging, but that's okay. I'll make the question multiple choice. And I'll give a bit of a hint. The speaker is Dr. Jennifer Hall Rivera. I did a little bit of digging, and it seems she was a former forensic scientist in some South Florida crime scene unit, but I couldn't find which one, and the AIG site doesn't say which one, just that she worked with a CSU. So maybe this will be like a certain cold case detective. Anyway, I wasn't able to find any information on her in the International Association for Identification, and nowhere on Google Scholar either. So I don't know if she really has any peer-reviewed articles, but I put too much work into this already. Let's just get to the question. For this video, is Dr. Jennifer Hall Rivera of Answers in Genesis going to talk about how science can't explain, but the Bible can, on the topic or topics of A. The resurrection of Mr. Jesus, B. Why humans sleep, C. Bird migration, D. Dreams, E. Morality, F. All of the above. I'll give you a moment to put your guess in the chat or comments. Mark your answers because you may be surprised. Everyone have their answers ready? Okay, let's see what Dr. Jenny has to say.
Only heaven silent for an answer.
So can science truly answer why we sleep?
This question is a bit tricky to answer definitively because of that word truly. What does she mean here? I'm going to guess that she means, can science fully explain why we sleep? Which I would have to admit the answer is no. Science does not have all the answers right now. We know a ton more about sleep than we did 100, 200, 500, or 1,000 years ago, and certainly more than when the Bible was written. Rather than my usual tactic of going into the topic and answering the question as much as I can, I will briefly point out some of what we do know and move on. So sleep helps conserve energy, allowing organisms to maintain balance between active periods and metabolic rest. We know sleep is essential for recovery and restoration, specifically repairing tissues, growing muscles, and synthesizing proteins. The brain also clears out metabolic waste during sleep. The most common point is that we know sleep plays a very important role in emotional regulation, learning, and memory consolidation. During this time, the brain solidifies information gathered during the day and gets rid of unimportant details, which makes sleep essential for cognitive efficiency. It also appears that sleep is necessary for neuroplasticity, which is the brain's capacity to continue growing and evolving in response to life's events. It is how the brain adapts to experiences and forms new connections, along with maintaining the health of existing connections. Though, to put it more succinctly, I would say no, and it doesn't need to. Science primarily explains the how something happens, as well as the causes that lead up to it happening. Asking why tends to imply the realm of philosophy, which is not always in the domain of science.
They've studied people sleeping, right?
Right.
They know we need rest, but scientifically, we really just can't explain sleep.
This is a different claim altogether. I could agree that science has not yet answered every question about sleep, and particularly that existential why brought up earlier, but it has explained a lot about the functions, mechanisms, and roles of sleep. Okay, I can't keep going without breaking it down. I'm just that kind of teacher. I'm surprised I lasted 5 minutes. Science has detailed understanding of how sleep works on a physiological and neurological level. We know about sleep cycles, the REM and non-REM, brainwave patterns, and how hormones like melatonin regulate sleep. The mechanisms are well explored. Sleep's role in memory consolidation, emotional regulation, physical recovery, and brain waste clearance are well documented. Researchers have substantial evidence for how these functions impact overall health and cognitive functioning. While there are multiple hypotheses, scientists do continue to explore why sleep evolved in animals. There's still some debate here, but several plausible theories have substantial scientific backing. I will grant that science hasn't fully answered points such as why sleep takes the specific form it does, especially when considering the risks of being unconscious in the wild, and why sleep is universal among animals yet varies in duration and patterns across species. But to claim that scientifically we just can't explain sleep is a gross oversimplification. Science has provided extensive explanations for what sleep does, how it works, and even some insights into why it evolved. Even though there are some unanswered questions, especially concerning deeper evolutionary reasons, it's more accurate to say that we understand a lot about sleep, but not everything yet. I worry that she's going to do a God of the Gap style argument. I predict, and I haven't seen that far as of yet, that she will say something like, science can't explain this, but the Bible says Psalm 4:8, or Psalm 127:2, or Exodus 28 through 10, or something like that. Because I don't think the Bible says anything about why humans sleep. Just that it presents sleep as a gift from God, a sign of human dependence on divine care, and a natural part of human life that reflects human limitations. But really, sleep is framed in spiritual terms, focusing on trusting God and experiencing His peace, rather than explaining any biological necessity. Let's keep going to see if I'm right.
We also can't explain why people dream, or what they dream, or why they dream certain things.
This is correct, but again, irrelevant. While we have some theories in the colloquial sense, we don't have a solid answer for why people dream. We know they happen, but we aren't sure why. Of course, saying, science doesn't know, so I can fit my religious explanation into it, is a God of the Gaps argument. Early Greeks didn't know where lightning came from, so they attributed them to Zeus, as well as being invented by Minerva. Now we know why lightning happens, and we take measures to make us much safer than we were even 300 years ago. Humans didn't know, therefore invoked the divine. Now we do, and we discard the idea of needing a divine explanation for that topic. People were wrong when they said that Zeus wielded lightning like a weapon then, and putting any gods into any gaps of our knowledge is just as fallacious now as it was then.
We really can't explain why birds migrate. Now we know it has something to do with the seasons, we've observed that.
Okay, another one of these, but this time she's just inaccurate. Science has a solid understanding of why birds migrate. Though there are still some nuances being studied, I'm gonna list the main reasons why birds migrate, again because I can't not do it. Many bird species migrate to escape cold winters or harsher weather conditions that make it difficult to survive. For example, birds that breed in temperate or polar regions migrate to warmer areas during the winter months. Birds migrate in search of food. In many regions, food sources such as insects, fruits, and seeds become scarce in the winter, prompting birds to move to areas where food is more abundant. Migration allows birds to take advantage of different environments for breeding. Birds often migrate to areas where there is less competition for nesting sites and abundant food resources to raise their young. Bird migration patterns are influenced by day length and climate changes. As the days become shorter and temperatures drop, birds sense these environmental cues and migrate in response. Migration is often driven by genetic programming and evolutionary adaptation. Birds that migrate tend to have higher survival and reproductive success, and these traits are passed on to future generations. So while there may be some unanswered questions regarding the exact mechanisms, such as how they navigate over long distances, why birds migrate is well explained by science.
But no one's ever sat down with a bird and said, hey, why do you go to this same bird feeder year after year as you travel down the eastern part of the United States to South Florida?
Okay, that was pretty bad. We don't need to ask an animal why it always goes to where it knows food will be. Behavior like this is a result of learning and reinforcement. We don't ask a stray cat why it goes to certain houses that gave it food in the past. Birds use memory and instinct to locate food sources. Animals, including birds, are highly capable of learning patterns. If a bird finds food at a certain feeder during migration and encounters it consistently over time, it will naturally return because it learns that this spot is reliable. So on the long journey from one place to another, they will stop where they know they can get food pretty easily. This isn't a surprise. So during a long migration, it's not surprising that birds would stop at familiar places where they know food is available. It's a matter of survival behavior and pattern recognition, not just some mystery that requires direct questioning of this bird.
Science helps us describe how the world is, but it cannot make any judgments about whether that state of affairs is right, wrong, good, or bad.
Science helps us describe how the world is by explaining the mechanisms and processes of the natural world, but it isn't designed to make judgments about what's right, wrong, good, or bad. Those kinds of value judgments fall into the realm of ethics and philosophy. There's a philosophical principle put forth by David Hume that says you can't derive an ought from an is, which means that just because we know how something works doesn't tell us how things should work or how people should behave. Science can help inform ethical discussions by providing data and understanding, but it can't, by itself, determine what is morally right or wrong. But why is this, I hear none of you say? Right, wrong, good, and bad all imply the existence of a goal or purpose, but science doesn't operate with specific goals in mind. Its purpose is to describe, explain, and predict natural phenomena, not to determine how things ought to be. Now I get to go into the philosophy aspect. The esteemed doctor here is committing a category error. A category error occurs when someone applies concepts or criteria from one category to a different category where they don't fit. In this case, applying moral judgments, right, wrong, good, or bad, to scientific descriptions, how things are, is a classic example of a category error. Here's why. Science and ethics are fundamentally different domains. Science deals with empirical data and mechanisms. It describes what is. Ethics and philosophy deal with value judgments and moral principles. They explore what ought to be. Mixing these domains is a category error because it conflates descriptive statements with normative or evaluative statements. As I said, science does not have goals or purposes. It describes the world without inherent values or objectives. Ethical judgments, on the other hand, involve assessing actions or states in terms of goals or values. Thus, evaluating scientific findings in terms of moral rightness or wrongness is misplaced. As I touched on briefly, science provides descriptive knowledge, what is, while ethical reasoning provides normative knowledge, what ought to be. This distinction is important. Applying normative criteria to descriptive facts is a fundamental misunderstanding of how each domain operates.
So where do we go for that answer? Right? Science can't answer it.
We don't go anywhere, except to go exploring to understand these ideas better. That is how we learn new things. We go out and we do the sciencing. To go back to my previous example, ancient Greek natural philosophy couldn't explain why lightning happened, so they resorted to the gods. When we actually looked years, decades, centuries, millennia later, we found that there is a natural explanation for why lightning occurs. And now we don't, well, most of us don't, attribute lightning to the gods anymore. Everything that has ever been attributed to a god, and we found a natural explanation for it, how did we figure that out? Was it some holy book? Oh my, no. It was through science, and then better science. As we learn more and more, the gaps to put a god into get smaller and smaller. I'm amazed that this did not occur to Dr. Rivera. Or maybe something got in the way that prevented her from thinking like this. I don't know.
There's only one place we can go, and that's God's perfect word.
No. Ignoring the label and just calling it the Bible, I already pointed out that it doesn't explain why people sleep. I didn't touch on dreams because that was such a small point. But in the Bible, dreams are generally viewed as a means of divine communication or some kind of prophetic revelation. The focus is on their role as a tool for conveying messages from God, providing guidance, and revealing future events, and says nothing about why dreams occur from anything close to any kind of scientific perspective. But birds are mentioned a few times in the Bible, so it may say something about why they migrate, right? Well, the closest thing seems to be Jeremiah 8:7, where it mentions that birds observe the time of their migration. But that is literally it. Nothing about why they migrate, not even a because God wanted them to have a vacation and change of scenery. At best, it is an acknowledgement that birds' migration patterns are part of the natural order, though it then contrasts it with the failure of people to understand God's ways. So no, the Bible doesn't really explain anything about these questions. At most, there's mention that it happens. The The closest we got was about dreams and that God used them for things. But that was it. And of course, there wouldn't necessarily be a reason to mention a dream that didn't further the narrative or story. So nope, not a single one of these why questions are answered by the Bible. So let's recap. What are the questions that science can't answer but the Bible can? Here they are on screen. All in all, a wholly, get it, unimpressive list, and mostly incorrect anyway. It seems like a big ol' God of the Gaps argument. If they can say that the Bible answers these questions, we can look at questions the Bible doesn't answer and stick another religious text in there from a different religion, right? It is the exact same tactic being used here, except science can back up its finding while the Bible cannot. That's it for this one. So what do you think? Do you agree with my responses on these points? Do you have a different take? Did you get the answer to the multiple choice question at the beginning right? Let me know in the comments below. If you found these responses a refreshing contrast to the claims being made, show that by hitting that like button. Though if you'd like a polyphasic experience with my videos, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and get a new FASIC every week delivered right to your brain, or in this case, channel. I need to give an extra thanks to my dreamy patrons: Calamitous Anima, Sora, Long-Haired Lefty, Musical Ocelot, Ooga Booga Luga, Anonymous Netizen, Angel, Tarek Alkasab, Jamabam, Kai Henningsen, and Triple Towel, who are the reasons why my dream of having a channel continues to come true. If you'd like to be a figment of my imagination as well, you can migrate over to patreon.com/darkofalltrades and join the... what is a good name for a group of birds? I definitely don't want to say flock for obvious reasons. Let's see, a parliament of owls, a bouquet of pheasants. Those don't sound right for this. Join the murmuration? Join the tiding? The paddle? The gaggle? Not quite right. Well, I'm running a bit long on this segment, so I'll just pick one at random. Come and join the murder! Well, I suppose putting crows on the list wasn't the best idea. It's too late now. That silliness aside, thank you all so much for hanging out with me to the end. I have been thinking about doing more with the videos, and perhaps I'll try some ideas out soon. I actually planned on this being a response to multiple shorts, but this one was just too difficult to not go into my typical lectures on these topics that really have nothing to do with religion, but are fun to talk about. Thanks for letting me explain things. And as always, keep learning.
War on error. We have declared war on error.